Welcome to the channel. This is a brand new Manhwa recap channel, and your support means a lot. If you enjoy the story, please like the video and subscribe to help the channel grow. I'll be uploading new Manhwa content daily, so be sure to check back often for the latest chapters and updates. Now, let's get into the
Wang Yu
story.
stared at the familiar name in the chat channel. Ji Feng. He recognized him immediately. Ji Feng was a well-known internet personality and wilderness survival blogger with millions of followers. Wang Yu had watched quite a few of his videos before entering the survival game. Unlike most ordinary players, Ji Feng actually had experience. He had already participated in other survival games and had even uploaded guide videos afterward, explaining what he had learned. Apparently, Ji Feng had purchased another game invitation card and entered Polar Night Wilderness Survival. Wang Yu wasn't the only person who recognized him. The moment other players realized Ji Feng was in the channel, messages began flooding the screen. Many of them were fans. Others simply knew his reputation and hoped that someone with genuine survival experience could tell them what to do. Eventually, Ji Feng responded. He explained that one of the biggest problems everyone currently faced was lighting. Many players had tried using burning pieces of wood as makeshift torches. Unfortunately, ordinary branches didn't burn well for very long. Once the outer surface became charred, the flame often weakened or disappeared. Ji Feng suggested a better solution: a finish torch. By arranging or cutting wood properly, players could create a much more efficient source of light and heat. According to Ji Feng, a properly made finish torch could burn for at least an hour. He announced that he would upload a video demonstrating how to make one. Even better, he planned to make several himself and list them in the trading channel. Players who couldn't make their own could exchange supplies for one. The chat immediately became even more active. But Ji Feng had something more important to tell everyone. He warned the other players not to obsess over actually completing Polar Night Wilderness Survival. Their first objective should simply be staying alive. One more day, then another, then another. Every 7 days survived would earn a player a survival gift package. Even if someone couldn't last until the end of the game, surviving long enough to collect several packages could still make the experience worthwhile. There were also other rewards hidden throughout survival games: game currency, special items, and potentially valuable objects that could be taken back to Blue Star. But none of those rewards mattered if the player died before obtaining them. Survival came first. Ji Feng's advice received an enthusiastic response. Some players agreed that completing the entire game seemed unrealistic. If they could survive long enough to earn a few gift packages, they would already consider that a victory. Others began discussing the equipment they had selected. One player proudly announced that he had chosen a camping pot. As long as he could boil water, he believed he could survive for a month. Another joked that because he weighed more than 200 caddies, he had enough stored body fat to avoid starving anytime soon. Then, one message caught everyone's attention. A player revealed that he had chosen 9 animal traps. People immediately questioned how that was possible. Each player had only been allowed 5 selections. The answer was surprisingly simple. The game never said players couldn't select the same item more than once. The animal trap option provided 3 traps. That player had selected it 3 separate times. 3 sets, 9 traps. The chat erupted. Some players praised him for thinking of something they hadn't considered. Another person claimed he had done something even better. He had chosen a 9-meter climbing rope. According to him, that length of rope could be split into many smaller sections and turned into more than 20 useful survival setups for catching small animals. The claim immediately drew attention. Players began flooding the chat, eager to learn more about his idea. Naturally, he had no intention of sharing that knowledge for free. Anyone who wanted the details would have to trade supplies for the information. Wang Yu quietly continued reading. Not everyone in the channel was feeling hopeful. Several players complained that the game was far too difficult. Some worried about what would happen once the easy-to-find dry wood was gone. Others were already talking about quitting altogether. Then Wang Yu noticed another message. A player complained that he had selected a fishing net,
Yet after walking around all morning, he hadn't found so much as a decent puddle. Wang Yu's attention sharpened. A fishing net. Unlike that player, Wang Yu had already found a stream, and there were fish in it. He immediately sent the man a friend request. The player's name was Zhang Dahai.
A short time later, the request was accepted. Wang Yu wasted no time. He asked Zhang Dahai if he would be willing to trade away his fishing net since he currently had nowhere to use it. Zhang Dahai immediately realized what that meant. Wang Yu must have found water. But despite his terrible luck so far, Zhang Dahai refused. He knew how to fish. As far as he was concerned, the fishing net was still his best chance of securing a reliable food supply. All he needed was to find a river, pond, or stream. Wang Yu tried reasoning with him. The entire wilderness was covered in darkness. Without sufficient lighting, Zhang Dahai couldn't explore very far. There was no guarantee that any body of water existed nearby. The fishing net might remain completely useless. Zhang Dahai still wouldn't surrender it. He had already committed himself to the plan. He would either find somewhere to fish or fail trying. Wang Yu realized there was little point continuing the argument. He was preparing to close the conversation when another message arrived. Zhang Dahai had something else. A crossbow. And unlike the fishing net, he was willing to trade it. Wang Yu became interested immediately. Why had someone so focused on fishing chosen a crossbow? Zhang Dahai explained. He had been overly confident. Because he already knew how to fish, he assumed food wouldn't be a serious problem. That allowed him to use one of his starting selections on something he simply wanted. A crossbow. He planned to use it for protection. But after spending the entire morning searching without finding water, he had begun regretting that choice. Right now, he needed something more practical. Wang Yu asked what he wanted. Zhang Dahai's answer was immediate. An animal trap. If he couldn't find somewhere to fish, at least a trap might allow him to catch food on land. Wang Yu considered the offer. He had 3 animal traps, and Zhang Dahai possessed a crossbow. For an ordinary player, exchanging away a valuable hunting trap might have been a difficult decision. But Wang Yu wasn't an ordinary player. He had the dice. More importantly, Zhang Dahai didn't know exactly how many traps Wang Yu possessed. So Wang Yu agreed. 1 animal trap for the crossbow. Zhang Dahai was shocked. He even asked whether Wang Yu was serious. A crossbow wasn't particularly useful for hunting in complete darkness. Giving up an animal trap for it seemed like a questionable trade. Wang Yu quickly gave him an explanation. He claimed that he had selected animal traps twice at the beginning of the game. Since each selection provided 3 traps, that supposedly meant he had 6. Losing a few wouldn't hurt him. Then Wang Yu went even further. Instead of offering 1 trap, he offered 3. 3 animal traps in exchange for the crossbow. Zhang Dahai could hardly believe his luck. Wang Yu encouraged him to keep searching for water, and joked that if Zhang Dahai eventually found fish, he could repay the favor later. Zhang Dahai happily agreed. With 3 traps, he would have another method of obtaining food while continuing his search for somewhere to use the fishing net. The deal was nearly complete. There was only one problem. Wang Yu's animal traps weren't currently inside his backpack. He had already deployed them. So he sent Zhang Dahai one final message. Wait a few minutes. He would retrieve the traps, and then they could make the exchange. Wang Yu closed the chat. A crossbow was about to become his newest survival Wang Yu
tool.
closed his conversation with Zhang Dahai. He had agreed to trade 3 animal traps for Zhang Dahai's crossbow, but Wang Yu had no intention of simply handing over 3 of the traps he currently possessed. There was something he wanted to do first. Wang Yu removed all 3 animal traps from his spatial backpack. He went to the nearby stream, found a strong tree vine, and used it to tie the 3 traps together into a single bundle. It was already past 3 in the afternoon. More importantly, 6 hours had passed since Wang Yu last used his mysterious dice. The golden dots on its surface had completely recovered. That meant he could use his ability again. Wang Yu stretched out his right hand. The egg-sized white jade dice appeared in his palm. All 6 sides once again glowed with golden dots. Holding the bundle of 3 traps in his other hand, Wang Yu focused his attention on them. Increase the quantity of this bundle of animal traps. The dice successfully locked onto the target. Wang Yu tossed it. The mysterious dice floated in the air and began spinning. After several moments, it slowed, then stopped. 4. Wang Yu had rolled a 4. 4 glowing copies of the bundled traps appeared around the dice. With a thought, Wang Yu materialized them. 4 additional bundles landed on the ground. Each bundle contained 3 animal traps. That meant his ability had just created 12 additional traps. Combined with the original 3, Wang Yu now possessed 15 animal traps. He smiled. This was one of the tricks he had discovered while experimenting with the dice. If he targeted a single animal trap, the dice would only multiply that one trap. But by tying several identical items together, the entire bundle could be treated as one target. There was a restriction. The bundled objects had to be the same kind of item. He couldn't simply tie random supplies together and multiply everything at once. Still, being able to multiply groups of identical objects dramatically increased the usefulness of his ability. Now that he had 15 traps, giving 3 away no longer mattered. Wang Yu contacted Zhang Dehai and initiated the trade. Zhang Dehai asked one final time whether he was certain. Wang Yu confirmed. The trading interface appeared. Zhang Dehai placed his crossbow into the exchange, along with the 3 arrows that came with it. Wang Yu placed 3 animal traps on his side. Both confirmed the transaction. The trade was complete. A wooden crossbow appeared in Wang Yu's hands. It measured roughly 40 centimeters long, while its 3 arrows were about 20 centimeters each. Wang Yu immediately wanted to test it. He spotted a small tree several meters away. He drew the bowstring, loaded an arrow, aimed, and pulled the trigger. The arrow shot through the darkness. A moment later, it slammed firmly into the tree trunk. Wang Yu's eyes brightened. This was the first time in his life he had used a real bow or crossbow. The weapon was primitive, built with a wooden frame, but at close range it was extremely dangerous. Its effective killing range exceeded 10 meters. Wang Yu felt much safer. Until now, his military shovel had been his main defensive weapon. The crossbow gave him the ability to attack something before it reached him. He still regretted failing to obtain Zhang Dehai's fishing net. There were clearly fish in the stream. A fishing net would have been extremely useful. Wang Yu sent Zhang Dehai another message. If he failed to find somewhere to fish, Wang Yu told him to contact him. He would still be willing to trade for the fishing net. Zhang Dehai replied that if he couldn't find a fishing spot, he would give Wang Yu the net before he died. Wang Yu stared at the message. He didn't even know how to respond to that. After closing the conversation, another idea occurred to him. Zhang Dehai wasn't the only player who had useful equipment. With 100,000 players in the chat channel, there had to be others willing to trade their starting tools. Wang Yu searched through the messages. Unfortunately, he couldn't find anyone offering a fishing net. He did find someone who had selected a camping pot. Wang Yu immediately sent that player a friend request. For now, however, there was no response. He placed the crossbow inside his spatial backpack, drank some boiled water, and rested briefly. Then Wang Yu returned to his most important task, finding the perfect location for his shelter. He continued searching near the stream. Half an hour passed. He encountered several areas that could potentially work, but none of them felt quite right. Building a shelter would require a huge investment of time and energy. Wang Yu didn't want to choose a location carelessly and regret it later. As he continued walking, something unusual appeared within his light. Green leaves. The plant looked strangely similar to a succulent from Blue Star. Wang Yu approached and touched it. Immediately, the game interface identified it. Green mushroom. Contains paralyzing toxins. Not edible. Wang Yu quickly pulled his hand away. Unlucky.
Apparently, it wasn't a succulent at all. It was some unusual mushroom-like organism. Since it couldn't be eaten, Wang Yu lost interest. Then he noticed something more important ahead. The ground began rising. A hillside. High ground was exactly what he'd been looking for. Wang Yu started climbing. The slope wasn't particularly steep, and scattered trees grew across it. After a couple of minutes, however, he saw a forest farther ahead. Entering dense forests in an unknown wilderness was dangerous, but Wang Yu needed elevated land for his shelter. He carefully continued. Once he entered the forest, the terrain actually became easier. There were many enormous trees, but very little dense undergrowth. Fallen leaves covered most of the ground. Wang Yu cautiously moved deeper. Several minutes later, he encountered a large rocky area. Stones of different sizes were scattered everywhere. Many were covered in thick moss, with grass and weeds growing between them. The terrain looked difficult to cross. Wang Yu decided to follow the outer edge instead. Then suddenly, his eyes lit up. Ahead of him stood an enormous boulder. Wang Yu hurried toward it. Under the flickering light of his torch, he slowly examined the stone. It towered above the surrounding rocks. The more Wang Yu studied it, the more satisfied he became. Finally, he made his decision. This would be the location of his shelter. Wang Yu moved several smaller stones together and created a simple fire pit. Then he removed dry firewood from his backpack and lit a bonfire. With a stronger source of light, he inspected the enormous boulder again. He opened the measuring tool on his wristband. The boulder's highest point was approximately 5.4 meters. It had 4 major rock faces. Their widths measured roughly 5.3 meters, 5.9 meters, 6.5 meters, and 7.1 meters. Wang Yu became increasingly excited. The enormous stone could drastically simplify the construction of his shelter. Now he only needed to determine exactly how to use it. One side immediately caught his attention. The 5.3-meter face was relatively flat. Despite being the narrowest side of the boulder, its smooth surface made it ideal for construction. There was only one significant flaw. Near its upper left corner was a large, irregular gap. The neighboring rock face was shorter than the others. While most of the boulder rose approximately 5.4 meters, that section was only around 4.1 meters tall. The difference created an opening roughly 1.3 meters high and 0.7 meters wide. It ruined the otherwise solid appearance of the wall. But Wang Yu wasn't discouraged. He stood before the enormous stone, studying it carefully. A plan was beginning to form. This boulder wasn't simply part of the landscape anymore. It was about to become the foundation of his home.
Wang Yu continued studying the enormous boulder. The 5.3-meter-wide rock face wasn't perfect. It had the unusual gap near the top, and it was narrower than the other sides. But its relatively flat surface was exactly what Wang Yu wanted. After considering several possibilities, he developed a preliminary plan for his shelter. Before anything could be built, however, the surrounding ground needed to be prepared. Wang Yu removed his military shovel and started working. The ground in front of the boulder was covered with soil, weeds, and scattered rocks. He began clearing everything away. The work was exhausting. For more than an hour, Wang Yu dug, scraped, moved stones, and removed vegetation. Eventually, he managed to create a relatively flat clearing, approximately 10 meters across. Then, he began planning the actual structure. Using a small rock, Wang Yu marked measurements on the ground and against the stone face. He repeatedly checked dimensions with the measuring tool built into his wristband. At the same time, he opened the memo function in his private channel and recorded his ideas. Every measurement mattered. Every decision mattered. This shelter needed to protect him for much longer than a single night. Wang Yu continued planning until approximately 6 in the evening. Then he stopped. It was time to deal with food. Now that his shelter location had finally been chosen, he could properly deploy his animal traps nearby. Wang Yu prepared another torch and retraced the route back toward the stream. He moved through the rocky area, then through the forest, then down the long slope. Eventually, he reached the water. Wang Yu checked the time. The trip had taken only about 6 minutes. Excellent. His future shelter was elevated and protected, but still close enough to the stream for easy access to water. That confirmed he had chosen a good location. Wang Yu started another bonfire beside the stream. Now that the waterway provided a reliable landmark, he could also position his animal traps without worrying about losing them in the endless darkness. Holding a fresh torch, he traveled downstream. Whenever he found an area that looked like it might be used by wild animals, Wang Yu stopped. He opened one of his animal traps, placed it carefully on the ground, covered it with leaves, then marked the nearby area so he could locate it again. He continued downstream. Another trap. Then another. Wang Yu positioned them roughly 50 to 100 meters apart. Eventually, all 12 of the traps he still possessed had been deployed. With 12 traps working simultaneously, Wang Yu estimated that his chances of catching prey were several times higher than those of an ordinary player with only 3. The traps were now his main method of obtaining land animals, but there was still plenty of time left. So Wang Yu returned to searching the stream for water snails. There were many of them. The only real problem was visibility. His makeshift wooden torch burned poorly and needed to be replaced every few minutes. Fortunately, plenty of fallen branches had accumulated along the stream. Wang Yu gathered dry wood as he searched. He also collected useful tree vines and stored them inside his backpack. After more than an hour of searching, Wang Yu had collected 36 water snails. The number wasn't especially impressive. The darkness made everything much slower. Because living creatures couldn't be placed inside the spatial backpack, Wang Yu cracked the snails open with stones. He removed their meat, skewered it onto wooden sticks, and stored it. Then something moved in the water. Wang Yu stopped. His torch illuminated a large fish swimming in the shallow portion of the stream. A very large fish. Wang Yu stared at it. If he tried grabbing the fish with his hands, it would escape into deeper water immediately. Then he remembered the weapon he had just obtained. The crossbow. A bold idea entered his mind. The fish was only around 3 meters away. At that distance, could an arrow penetrate the water and kill it? Wang Yu removed the crossbow from his backpack. He loaded an arrow, raised the weapon, and aimed. The fish remained in the shallow water. Wang Yu didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. The arrow shot forward and struck the water. The fish violently twisted. Mud exploded upward from the bottom of the stream, turning the water cloudy. Wang Yu couldn't see whether the arrow had actually connected. Then 2 system notifications appeared. Catfish meat, 320 grams. Copper coins, 37. Wang Yu grinned. He hit it. 1 arrow, 1 kill. Wang Yu hurried forward and collected the fish meat and copper coins. Then he recovered the arrow from the water. Ha ha ha! Now he had fish to eat. 36 water snails, a large catfish, 37 more copper coins. This had turned into a very successful trip. More importantly, Wang Yu had discovered another method of obtaining food. Whenever a large fish entered shallow water, he could potentially hunt it using the crossbow. He understood that it wouldn't always be easy. Deeper water would make accurate shots much more difficult. He would need to wait for opportunities. Still, the crossbow had already proved its value. Before heading back, Wang Yu started another bonfire. He had collected plenty of vines and wanted to experiment with them. His tin bucket was currently being wasted storing berries. He needed the bucket for something more important: water. So Wang Yu decided to weave a basket. He arranged the vines and began weaving them over and under one another. It was his first attempt. The result wasn't beautiful, but after more than half an hour, Wang Yu had created a rough basket roughly the same size as his bucket,
about 30 centimeters wide and 30 centimeters tall. Appearance didn't matter. It only needed to hold things. Wang Yu transferred his berries from the tin bucket into the woven basket. Then he stored the basket inside his spatial backpack. The backpack had another extremely useful property. Food stored inside remained fresh because its interior functioned like a sterile, vacuum-like preservation space. That meant his berries wouldn't spoil nearly as quickly. Now the tin bucket was free. Wang Yu walked to the stream and filled it with water. Then he placed the full bucket inside his backpack. Since his shelter was approximately 6 minutes away, this would allow him to carry plenty of water back without making constant trips to the stream. With everything prepared, Wang Yu began returning toward his new shelter location. He followed the stream at first, using it as a natural landmark. Without landmarks, navigating this wilderness would have been extremely difficult. The darkness made every direction look the same. As he walked, Wang Yu continued gathering dry firewood. Firewood was becoming one of his most important resources. It provided light. It allowed him to cook. It boiled his drinking water. And once he began sleeping outside overnight, it would provide warmth. It was already past 8 in the evening. Nighttime technically meant very little in a world trapped in polar night, but Wang Yu's body still needed sleep. Fortunately, dry branches were plentiful near the stream. By the time Wang Yu finished collecting them, his spatial backpack was packed with enough firewood to last through the night. Food, water, weapons, traps, firewood, and now, a permanent shelter location. His first day in polar night wilderness survival was finally beginning to come together.
Wang Yu climbed the steep slope, passed through the forest and rocky terrain, and finally returned to the enormous boulder he had chosen as the location for his shelter. The fire beside the stone had already gone out. Wang Yu added more dry wood and used his torch to bring it back to life before sitting down to rest. His latest trip had been productive. He had collected 36 additional water snails, giving him another 360 grams of meat, and bringing his total supply of water snail meat to approximately 660 grams. The snails had also earned him 72 copper coins. On top of that, the large catfish he'd killed with the crossbow had provided 320 grams of fish meat and another 37 copper coins. For the moment, food wasn't an immediate problem. Wang Yu removed 2 skewers of snail meat from his backpack and roasted them over the fire. At noon, he'd only eaten around 100 grams of meat. Now that his food supply had improved, he allowed himself a larger meal and ate approximately 200 grams. Afterward, he used his military shovel to boil drinking water. The shovel wasn't exactly an ideal cooking pot. It could only hold enough water for one large mouthful at a time, so Wang Yu had to repeat the process several times. By the time he finished eating, drinking, and resting, it was already past 9 o'clock at night. Wang Yu checked the mysterious dice. More than 6 hours had passed since he'd last used it. The golden dots on all 6 sides had completely recovered. His ability was ready again. This time, Wang Yu wasn't interested in multiplying food or small tools. He turned toward the enormous boulder beside him. He had already spent considerable time planning how to use it. Now he was ready to find out whether his plan would work. Wang Yu placed his left hand against the massive stone. The boulder was enormous, but based on everything he'd learned about the dice, size shouldn't prevent the ability from working. He opened his right hand. The egg-sized white jade dice appeared above his palm, its golden dots glowing once again. Wang Yu focused. Increase the quantity of this boulder. The dice successfully locked onto the enormous stone. Wang Yu tossed it into the air. It began spinning. As he watched, he mentally reviewed the different shelter designs he'd prepared. He had plans for several possible results. Even a low roll could be useful. But the more copies the dice produced, the stronger and more complete his shelter could become. The dice slowed, then stopped. 3. Wang Yu had rolled a 3. Not the best possible result, but it was enough. 3 glowing images of the enormous boulder appeared around the dice.
Wang Yu smiled. With the original stone and 3 copies, he now effectively had 4 massive boulders to work with. That was enough to construct the shelter he'd envisioned. Earlier, Wang Yu had already cleared a large section of ground in front of the relatively flat, 5.3-meter-wide face of the original boulder. The cleared area stretched for tens of meters. He had also drawn straight lines across the ground to mark exactly where he wanted the duplicated stones to appear. This wasn't something he wanted to improvise. A mistake involving a boulder this large would be extremely difficult to correct. Wang Yu moved to the first marked position. With a thought, he released one of the duplicated stones. A gigantic boulder suddenly materialized. It struck the ground with a deep, heavy impact. The earth trembled beneath Wang Yu's feet. Dust exploded upward, and some of the surrounding soil was pushed aside by the tremendous weight. Wang Yu instinctively stepped backward. He had deliberately created the stone at ground level. If he'd allowed something that massive to appear several meters in the air and fall, the impact might have created an enormous crater. Even appearing directly against the ground caused far more disturbance than he'd expected. Once the dust settled, Wang Yu inspected the placement. The newly created boulder sat closely against the original. Because the stone surfaces were naturally rough and uneven, they didn't fit together perfectly. Small gaps remained between them. Fortunately, most were only a few centimeters wide, and even the widest sections were less than around 10 centimeters. There was one much larger opening near the upper portion. At the point where the 2 stones met, one section rose only about 4.1 meters, while the surrounding rock reached approximately 5.4 meters. That difference created a natural notch, roughly 1.3 meters high and 0.7 meters wide. Wang Yu noted the opening carefully. Then he moved to the opposite side. He released the second duplicated boulder. Another enormous impact shook the ground. This time, Wang Yu was prepared. After checking the placement, he found that the second stone fit closely against the original as well. Only narrow gaps remained between their surfaces. And unlike the first connection, there was no large opening at the top. The arrangement was working exactly as planned. Wang Yu now stood inside a massive U-shaped enclosure. The original boulder formed the back wall. The first duplicated stone formed the right wall. The second formed the left. The 2 side walls faced one another approximately 3 meters apart. The interior space measured roughly 5.3 meters long and 3 meters wide, about 16 square meters. Not enormous, but more than enough for one person, and the walls surrounding it were colossal. Before sealing the final side, Wang Yu did something important. He gathered stones inside the enclosure and constructed a fire pit. Then he lit a fire. He also carried a supply of dry firewood inside. Once the 4th wall was in place, getting supplies into the enclosure would become much more difficult. Only after preparing the interior did Wang Yu step back outside. He turned toward the remaining open side of the U-shaped structure. One duplicated boulder remained. Wang Yu released it. The enormous stone appeared with another heavy impact. Dust rose, the ground trembled, and the opening disappeared. 4 gigantic boulders now surrounded the central living space. The main structure of Wang Yu's shelter was complete. There was only one obvious problem. He was standing outside it. For most people, sealing themselves out of their own shelter would have been a disaster. Wang Yu wasn't concerned. He had already considered this possibility when designing the structure. As long as his dice produced at least 3 additional boulders, he intended to use the unusual high gap between the stones as his entrance. But reaching an opening more than 4 meters above the ground required something he didn't currently have: a ladder. Wang Yu picked up his torch and headed toward the nearby forest. Birch and snow pine were common throughout the area. Some of the trees were enormous. Wang Yu even encountered a snow pine more than 60 centimeters thick and likely tens of meters tall. Its upper branches disappeared completely into the darkness. He didn't even consider cutting it. Bringing down a tree that large would be dangerous even for an experienced lumberjack with proper equipment. Trying to do it with a military shovel would be ridiculous. Fortunately, Wang Yu didn't need anything that large.
The forest contained plenty of younger trees, only several centimeters thick. After examining the surrounding area, he decided that snow pine would work. He selected one approximately 7 centimeters thick. Before beginning, Wang Yu gathered nearby stones and constructed another small fire pit. Dead wood was plentiful throughout the forest, so he collected enough to start a bonfire. The flames pushed back the darkness around him. The fire served two purposes. It gave Wang Yu enough light to work, and hopefully discouraged wild animals from approaching while he was occupied. With the bonfire burning nearby, Wang Yu tightened his grip on the military shovel. He looked at the 7-centimeter thick snow pine in front of him. His stone fortress was standing. Now he just needed a way inside. Wang Yu raised the shovel. It was time to
Wang
build a
Yu
ladder.
returned to the nearby forest and began chopping down the 7-centimeter thick snow pine he had selected. His military shovel could cut wood, but he immediately noticed how inefficient it was compared with a real axe. Fortunately, the tree was relatively thin, so after several minutes of chopping, it finally toppled. He removed all of the branches and measured the trunk using the measuring function on his wristband. The pine was more than 6 meters long. Wang Yu then selected a second snow pine of approximately the same thickness and repeated the process. Once both trees were down and stripped of their branches, he cut each trunk down to approximately 4.5 meters. He wasn't finished with the branches either. From the discarded pine branches, Wang Yu selected pieces approximately 3 centimeters thick and cut them into 40-centimeter sections. He prepared 10 of these shorter wooden pieces. Then came the exhausting part, transporting everything back to his new stone shelter. Wang Yu had to make 4 separate trips. The 2 long pine trunks each required their own trip. Another trip carried the 10 short pieces, and on the final trip, he bundled the remaining pine branches together and brought those back as well. Once everything was beside the enormous stone structure, Wang Yu began building. He laid the 2 4.5-meter trunks parallel to each other. Using the military shovel, he carved grooves into them at regular intervals, approximately 1 groove every 40 centimeters. Each trunk received 10 grooves. Wang Yu then inserted his 10 40-centimeter wooden sticks between the 2 long trunks, fitting their ends into the grooves. To reinforce everything, he used vines to tightly bind each connection. When he finished, he had successfully constructed a homemade 4.5-meter wooden ladder. It was heavy, but manageable. This ladder was the key to entering his newly constructed shelter. Wang Yu carried it around to the section of the stone wall where the unusual gap existed. Because that portion of the boulder was only approximately 4.1 meters high, his 4.5-meter ladder could reach it comfortably. He leaned the ladder against the stone and climbed. For the first time, Wang Yu was able to see the top of the enormous boulder. The upper surface was surprisingly large, roughly 30 square meters, and relatively flat. However, it was covered in thick moss and bird droppings. He briefly considered exploring the top, but decided cleaning it could wait until later. More importantly, Wang Yu examined the strange gap created where 2 of his enormous replicated boulders met. Because the surrounding stone walls were approximately 5.4 meters high, while this particular section was only 4.1 meters, the difference created a recessed opening about 1.3 meters high, 0.7 meters wide, and roughly 1.1 meters long. Instead of treating the gap as a flaw, Wang Yu realized it could function as the entrance to his shelter. Standing inside the recessed opening, he could look directly down into the enclosed stone structure below. Wang Yu descended again, collected the bundle of pine branches he had brought from the forest, and carried them back up the ladder. From the opening, he tossed the branches down into the shelter. Then came the difficult part. He climbed back up and carefully pulled the heavy ladder onto the top of the boulder. After maneuvering it through the opening, Wang Yu lowered the ladder down the inside of the shelter. He then climbed down. For the first time, Wang Yu was officially inside his completed stone enclosure. The interior measured approximately 5.3 meters long by 3 meters wide, giving him around 16 square meters of usable space. For a wilderness shelter, it was enormous. More importantly, it was incredibly secure. The shelter was surrounded by 4 gigantic stone formations, each several meters thick. Wang Yu had already built a fire pit inside, although the fire was beginning to die down by the time he entered. He quickly added more dry wood. Then Wang Yu untied the bundle of snow pine branches and spread them across the ground. He lay down on them. After spending the entire day wandering through absolute darkness, gathering food and materials, setting traps, finding water, and building his shelter, Wang Yu finally allowed himself to relax. The thick stone walls surrounding him gave him something he had been missing all day: a sense of security. That was exactly why he had chosen this design. Living in endless darkness meant never knowing what might be outside the reach of his firelight. Inside his massive stone enclosure, Wang Yu could finally stop constantly watching his surroundings. The unusual gap in the stone had actually become useful. Instead of cutting a vulnerable doorway into the shelter, Wang Yu could simply use the high opening and his ladder to enter and exit. There was one drawback. Climbing a ladder every time he wanted to leave wasn't exactly convenient. Still, Wang Yu considered that a small price to pay for safety. He could improve the entrance later. For tonight, the shelter was more than good enough. Wang Yu was exhausted. Because he hadn't selected a tent or sleeping bag among his starting equipment, the pine branches would have to serve as his bed. Fortunately, the enclosed stone space was relatively small and contained a bonfire, so he didn't expect the temperature to become unbearably cold. Before going to sleep, however, Wang Yu decided to check the chat channel one more time. Almost immediately, he noticed an update from Ji Feng, the survival influencer he had been following. Ji Feng had placed 10 homemade torches on the trading channel. These weren't ordinary makeshift torches. They were finished torches, each capable of burning for approximately 1 hour. Ji Feng was willing to exchange them for food, dry firewood, or other useful supplies. Even more importantly, he uploaded a video teaching everyone how to make them. Unfortunately, Wang Yu had opened the chat channel too late. By the time he reached the trading channel, all 10 torches had already been traded away. This made Wang Yu realize that he needed to monitor the chat channel more frequently. He had only checked it a few times during the entire day, and valuable opportunities could easily appear and disappear while he was away. Wang Yu watched Ji Feng's tutorial instead. The finished torch design was surprisingly simple. A thick log was placed vertically. A hole was made downward through its center from the top, and another horizontal opening connected into the central cavity. The arrangement allowed air to reach the inside, while the fire burned through the center of the log, creating a long-lasting torch or compact fire source. Wang Yu immediately recognized how useful the design could be. There was just one problem: tools. The concept was simple, but drilling those openings into a thick log wasn't easy. Ji Feng could do it because he had selected a hammer and chisel among his survival equipment. Wang Yu didn't have either. For now, he would have to remember the idea and find another way to construct one later.
It was only a little after 10 p.m., and Wang Yu still wasn't ready to sleep. Since this was the first day of the survival game, most of the other players seemed to be having the same problem. When Wang Yu opened the chat channel, messages were flying past almost non-stop. Many players were already struggling badly. Some complained that they had gone the entire day without finding food. Others were almost out of dry firewood, and were begging anyone with extra supplies to lend or trade them some. Several people still hadn't managed to build proper shelters, and were openly worrying about whether wild animals might attack them during the night. Another player said that the kerosene in his lantern had already run out, leaving him concerned about how he was supposed to survive the endless darkness in the coming days. But survival problems weren't the only things filling the chat. Some people had already started finding creative ways to profit from the situation. One female player advertised herself as someone who could act either like a mature older sister or a cute younger girl. She offered private conversation to lonely male players in exchange for dry firewood. Apparently, the idea was working.
One player admitted that he'd already given her a piece of firewood just to talk with her. He said she had a pleasant voice, but one piece of wood only bought a few minutes of conversation. If he wanted to keep talking, he'd have to continue supplying her with wood. The other players couldn't believe someone actually had enough spare firewood to spend it that way. Another message came from someone claiming to be the son of the richest man in Jiangcheng. Instead of offering game supplies, he offered real-world money for food and firewood. He claimed that he was well known enough for people to verify his identity through video calls. The chat debated whether such a deal could be trusted. Some players recognized who he was, but pointed out an obvious problem. Any money he promised would probably only be paid after everyone returned from the survival game. Whether someone wanted to gamble their current survival supplies on that promise was their decision. Then Wang Yu noticed something even more interesting. An organization called the Azure Crimson Society was recruiting players. Their advertisement claimed that both their guild leader and vice-guild leader had successfully cleared survival games before. Other members had supposedly participated more than 10 times, giving the organization a large amount of accumulated survival experience. People who passed their assessment and joined would receive access to those survival strategies, as well as assistance from other guild members during games. They also offered real-world financial benefits. Members could receive at least 3,000 yuan per month, with higher-ranked members potentially receiving more. Particularly talented members might even be provided with game invitation cards, allowing them additional opportunities to enter survival games. Of course, there was a catch. Other players explained that organizations like the Azure Crimson Society expected their members to hand over a share of valuable rewards obtained inside the games. The discussion then shifted to another organization Wang Yu had seen mentioned earlier. Someone brought up the Enlightenment Special Operations Group. Unlike ordinary guilds, this group was apparently backed by the military. According to the players discussing it, Enlightenment consisted of carefully selected elite special forces soldiers whose purpose was specifically to enter and clear survival games. Every member was supposedly an exceptional soldier with the skills necessary to challenge dangerous game worlds. The revelation surprised several players. It meant the government clearly hadn't ignored the appearance of the survival games and had already begun organizing specialized teams to confront them.
While everyone was still discussing the different organizations, a system notification suddenly interrupted the conversation. A player named Yi Fei Fan had placed food on the trading channel. And not ordinary food, black bear meat. Yi Fei Fan listed 10 portions of 200 grams each, meaning he was offering roughly 2 kilograms of meat. His preferred trades were extraordinary items or game coins, although he was also willing to consider large quantities of dry firewood. The chat channel practically exploded. People couldn't understand how someone had already obtained black bear meat. It was pitch black outside. Finding a bear would be difficult enough. Actually killing one on the very first day seemed almost impossible. Some jokingly accused Yi Fei Fan of cheating, while others immediately tried offering firewood for the meat. The mention of extraordinary items also caught people's attention, with players asking what exactly qualified as one. Before that discussion could settle, another system announcement appeared. A player named Fang Miao Miao had listed 12 portions of giant lizard meat, each weighing 500 grams. That was an enormous amount of food. But Fang Miao Miao had unusual trade requirements. She apparently didn't like eating lizard meat and wanted to exchange it for another type of meat at a 1.5-to-1 ratio. The other players were stunned by how picky she was being. This was a survival game where some people hadn't eaten anything all day, yet Fang Miao Miao had enough food to reject several kilograms of perfectly edible meat because she didn't like the type. Before people could complain much longer, however, the entire listing disappeared. Someone had already bought it. That revelation shocked the channel even more. Not only had Fang Miao Miao somehow obtained several kilograms of giant lizard meat, but another unknown player possessed enough other meat to exchange for the entire batch almost immediately. Then came a third announcement. A strangely named player listed 6 500-gram portions of black-striped python meat. This player wasn't asking for other meat. Instead, they wanted dry firewood,
with the meat going to whoever offered the highest amount. By this point, ordinary players were beginning to question whether they were even participating in the same survival game. While some people were freezing, starving, and struggling to construct basic shelters, other players were apparently hunting bears, giant lizards, and huge snakes. Wang Yu paid especially close attention to the meat listings. He understood something most players didn't. Any meat he successfully purchased could potentially become much more valuable once he used his dice ability on it. He checked his own food supplies. He still had his 320-gram fish and 46 portions of water snail meat weighing 10 grams each. When he saw Fang Miao Miao's giant lizard meat, Wang Yu immediately considered exchanging some of his own meat for it. Unfortunately, he wasn't fast enough. Before he could complete the trade, another player bought everything. Wang Yu could only watch the opportunity disappear. Then the black-striped python meat appeared. This time, he acted quickly. Wang Yu calculated how much firewood he needed to survive the night and kept that amount for himself. He then offered all of his remaining dry firewood in an attempt to win some of the python meat. His reasoning was simple. If he could purchase a decent amount of meat and then use the mysterious dice to multiply it, the trade could become enormously profitable. For a moment, Wang Yu waited to see whether his bid would succeed. Then his firewood suddenly returned to him. The python meat had already been sold. Someone else had offered more. Wang Yu stared at the result, frustrated. There were 100,000 players inside this chat channel. Even with his unusual advantages, competing for valuable resources against that many people was going to be much harder than he had expected. The competition in this survival game was only beginning.